thank you very much. So I'm going to be taking you through the survey that the Agri-Food Regulator commissioned among suppliers of agricultural and food products about their experience at the trading relationship with retail and the hotel sector, or the wholesale sector. So the Agri-Food liaised with 8 different businesses to send the survey out. We created a unique link for each of those businesses so we could track exactly which suppliers completed the survey through which business. You can see here a list of the total supplier response, which was 306, and you can see it broken down by each of the different businesses. The survey was live from February to March, so it was over the course of a month. So in total, we 306 completed the survey. You can see the breakdown by each of the businesses. But each supplier dealt with multiple businesses, multiple retailers and wholesalers. So the total number of trading relationships that were rated is 948. Because we'll see later that the average number of businesses they deal with is 5. So they were asked about each supplier, each retailer that they deal with, and to rate that. Now, before I go into the data results, I just want to talk about a few methodological considerations. So this sample methodology, it's the exact same as what happens in the UK, but it is the first time we've completed the survey. And it was the best available to take a sample of these suppliers. However, it's valuable qualitative insights, but differences between the businesses you need to interpret with caution, and you can't necessarily extrapolate to the whole supplier population. So that's just the caveat for the data. So let's first look at the profile of the sample. So who were the suppliers that completed the survey? So the vast majority were direct suppliers, and if we look at who those direct suppliers dealt with, you can see a very high proportion with Musgraves, BWG, half of them with Tesco, Dunnes, Aldi, Lidl, Cisco. So that's who they dealt with. Moving on to the average number of retailers that they dealt with, you can see the average is 5, but for Musgraves it was slightly lower, and BWG. Again, looking at the profile, the vast majority were from Ireland. In terms of their turnover, it was spread right across the spectrum from up to 2 million, 2 to 10, 10 to 50, and 50 plus. And the number of employees matches the turnover. Now, what sort of foods did they supply? So the biggest category was ambient. 38%, or 4 in 10 suppliers supplied ambient foods, followed by chilled dairy ready meals, alcoholic drinks, non-alcoholic drinks, meat, fish, poultry, fruit and veg, and frozen food. Now, we asked them within that, did they supply branded and own label, or own label only, or branded? So you can see for ambient, that was the highest proportion of branded and own label. And then branded was more popular amongst the alcoholic drinks and the non-alcoholic drinks. So moving on to their experience with the UTPs. So a list was given on the survey of these are the prohibited UTPs, or the unconditional UTPs, and they were asked which of any of these had they experienced with any of the retailers in 2024. So the total instance of these unconditional UTPs was 12% of all the buyers. Of all the suppliers, sorry, and the numbers in brackets are the actual numbers, and what's charted here, the percentages. So you can see the breakdown, requiring to pay for loss or deterioration of their product. It was 5%, payment later than 30 days and 60 days came in at 4%, cancellations of orders, perishable products 3%, and paying to make a payment not related to a sale 3%. So in total, 12% had experienced them, 80% had not, 8% claim to not know. So they're the unconditional UTPs. We move to the conditional UTPs. So these are prohibited unless agreed in advance. So a mere 5% of the suppliers had, in 2024, experienced a conditional UTP. And that was buyers returning unsold products, or bearing the cost of discounts of the products. They were the top 2, and there were only 2% for suppliers. So if we put the two together, so what is the total instance of any UTP experienced? It comes to 14%, 35 suppliers, and that's the rank order list from both lists that I've just shown you. So 86% did not, 14% did. It was interesting to see from the UK survey that 90% over there said it was mostly compliant. So a small instance of experience, the UTPs. When you look at those 14% and what is the profile of them, they're spread right across the various turnover bands. They're not confined to the smaller or the bigger. They're quite diverse. So for each UTP experienced, we asked them, who did you have that UTP with? So they could give multiple responses, and they had to identify each of the retailers that they experienced it with. So what I've shown here is from the lowest to the highest. So for the unconditional UTPs, Musgraves at 9%, Marks and Spencer's, very small base for Marks and Spencer's, Tesco, Lidl and Dunnes, with the lowest being BWG and Aldi. Then the conditional UTPs, you can see the rank order there. At the top, it was Musgraves, Lidl, M&S. Now, I would draw your attention that there's not much of a difference between a 7% and 9%, but nonetheless, that is the rank order. When you put the two of them together and look at the total, who did they experience, which retailers did they experience any UTP with? Musgraves, there's 11%, M&S at 9%, Lidl, Dunnes and Tesco, with Aldi being the lowest at 2%. So we went on to ask, did you raise the UTP with the buyer? And what you can see here is only 30% of Musgraves raised it, but Musgraves 70% did not, Lidl 44%. So the numbers are quite small. We've charted the numbers. And then that smiley face was the overall satisfaction with the people who'd raised the UTP. So the vast majority who did raise it with the retailers were satisfied. Then we asked them the reasons for not raising with the UTP, and you can see here some of the verbatims. So they were allowed to just type this in. They wanted to maintain longer term relationships. They felt it would jeopardize their business. You can see the answers here they gave for not raising, but quite a number of them, if I go back to that other one, did not raise the UTP. You can see on the right. Okay, moving on to the next list. So we give them a full list here that you can see on the screen, and we said, which of these issues did you ever experience with buyers in 2024? Issues relating to the cost price increase request was the highest at 14%, so 37% of the suppliers mentioned that. Delays for non-payment or incurring significant costs because of inaccurate forecasting. So they were the top issues. So in total, if you combine all of those issues, 27% had experienced any issue, or 1 in 4 supplier. If we look at the profile of those 1 in 4, again, they're spread across the full spectrum in terms of turnover. And then if we look at who were the particular retailers that they claim to have experienced the issues, so we've got M&S, Lidl, Dunnes, Musgrave up there at 1 in 5, higher percentages for each of those. Tesco at 17%, Aldi 15%, Cisco, and BWG the lowest at only 6%. We also asked them whether they raised these issues, so these specific issues with the buyers. And you can see from these percentages and the numbers, they broadly reflect what you would have seen in the previous chart. So the vast majority had raised these issues with the retailers. Unlike the UTPs, where we saw the majority did not, in this case, they did raise it with the buyers. And then for the minority who didn't, we asked them why. Again, they found it difficult. They didn't want to damage the relationship. It was a new buyer. They weren't sure who to talk to. Again, you can read those. However, do they know who is the correct contact to raise the issue with within the buyer business? And we can see here the vast majority, they are aware of who the buyer is or who to contact across all of the retailers. Moving into the direct supplier's relationship with buyers. So here we asked, do you have a written supply agreement with the various buyers. Now, we did specify this is anything in writing, it's an email, it's a portal, so we gave a definition of what that written agreement could be. So Aldi topped the poll at 86% said they did have a written agreement, followed by Lidl, Musgraves. Now, we have shown here the proportion of people who said they just don't know. So there's a high proportion of don't knows here for some of these. So it's not like for Marks and Spencer's or Cisco or Tesco. A high proportion there just did not know was there a written agreement in place. But nonetheless, still a high number that say no, there isn't. This question was, are there innovative buyer practices that have had a positive impact on your trading relationship? And if so, with which retailer? So 1 in 3 of the suppliers who dealt with Aldi said Aldi have innovative practices, 28% for Lidl, 26% for Tesco, and then a fifth of the suppliers for Dunnes and Musgraves. And then when we asked them what are the innovative practices, a full spectrum was mentioned: forecasting, conferences, engagement in CSR, sharing forecasts, new approval process, flexibility and specifications. And then we asked them to rate how satisfied they were with the relationship with the various retailers. So the top line here is shown the proportion who are satisfied, and the bottom line is dissatisfied. So BWG, almost 8 in 10 suppliers claim to be satisfied, similar for Aldi, Tesco, Dunnes, and then with the highest dissatisfaction for Cisco and Musgraves at 14 and 18%. And then why are you satisfied? It's because they're clear, they make quick decisions, there's open, transparent communication, they're open, they're engaging, they're professional, communication is good. And then why are they dissatisfied? Now, I appreciate there's a lot to read here, but short-term contracts comes up, it's hard to get a face-to-face meeting with the buyer, an expectation to lower price constantly, they can be slow to act on an issue or request, the 6-month contract period there mentioned. Then, what are the main issues facing suppliers in the year ahead? So this is an open-ended question, so they could type in whatever they felt was important to share. So the single biggest issue which they came back with was cost increases and inflation, retailer and buyer challenges, raw material and ingredient availability. And this is some of the actual verbatims that they completed in terms of the issues they experienced. You can have a read there, but price reductions are coming up again, price variability, product availability, increasing in the minimum wage, crop-related issues, maintaining profitability, farm gate prices. And then general comments about the buyers, that was an additional open-ended, that they could give us any feedback. So what they talked about was positive buyer relationships, retailer practices of conduct, transparency and communication, pricing and cost. We did a sentiment analysis on the verbatims that they completed, and you can see it's balanced between the positive feedback that we got on buyers and negative, and also some neutral. And then these are some general comments about the buyers. A lot to read there, but cost price increases come up, and you saw that was at the top of the list in the earlier question. But very positive comments as well. Irish buyers amongst the most open, reliable, communicative and friendly compared to other export markets. Buyers trying to work with them, professional and receptive. So moving on to the Agri-Food Regulator. So we asked them, are you aware of the Agri-Food Regulator operating this confidential process, a complaints process? So 45%, or just half of all the suppliers, were aware of the Agri-Food Regulator. And then we asked them, would you raise a UTP with the regulator? So in that case, we had 69% that said they would. 34% were not sure, and 7% said they don't know. Then why would you not raise a UTP with the Agri-Food Regulator? So lots of the sentiment here was about retaliation, about being identified as the supplier. And it was interesting to hear that the confidentiality is assured in the previous presentation, but clearly there's some concerns here among some of the suppliers. They believe they could be identified. And that's it. That's the full detail of the UTPs. and the conditional UTPs, which is in the appendix. Thank you.
There's a lot to unpack in that. I think we can all agree, and it is interesting that we have the data now. At this stage, I just want to say we asked each of the 8 businesses surveyed for a chance to comment on the survey findings that would be shared with you, our wonderful audience today. And I'm going to read out 2 responses that were received from the 8. Aldi Ireland said they welcomed the publication of this supplier survey, congratulated the Agri-Food Regulator on a successful first year in office. They're proud to be recognised for their strong partnerships with suppliers, as well as being commended for commercial transparency and supplier satisfaction. They went on to say they invest over €1 billion annually directly with 330 Irish suppliers who are at the heart of their business, and they're pleased that the survey reflects the consistently positive and constructive relationships we work to build and maintain. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with our suppliers and supporting the important work of the regulator in the years ahead. And the second comment that was received was from BWG Foods, of course, the people behind the Mace brands and so on, and Spar. BWG Foods acknowledges receipt and appreciation for receiving the survey in advance of the inaugural conference in May. As always, BWG Foods will continue to work with the Office of the Regulator in a collaborative manner.